Hey there, welcome to Synth Seeker. This may not actually even go out on the channel, but for all of our friends over on the MLS Discord, this is a breakdown of the Midlife Monthly Music Challenge for November 2022. Ooh, excuse me. Oh, it's very, very early here. I got up early to do this breakdown because everyone else seems to be up at this time of day. All my friends apparently and cohorts are all in the EU or in Europe somewhere. So in solidarity, I am up. So let's get going. What's the point of this? So I'm Luke. I have this channel, Synth Seeker. And through SynthTube, I met this guy, Midlife Synthesist. We share the same birthday. Who knew? And then through this guy, I met this guy. So, hi, Haslo, who makes cool DAW-less electronic music, and he's like on this path of exploration, and it's a really good vibe. Basically, Haslo and I, through this guy and his monthly challenge, we got thrown together to make some music, and the format of the music is such that we were given a tempo and a key. So we were at 130 BPM in the D natural minor, and said go forth and make a piece. And the format was I got the first task, which was make a rhythm track. Then Haslo had to do a chord progression, and then I had to build a bass on top of that, and then he was going to do a melody or lead on top of that. And then we were just going to mush it all together production-wise and mangle it and release it. So here's a breakdown of how we're doing that. Haslo works completely in a DAW-less place for the most part, as far as I could tell. And so the method that we used to collaborate was to pass audio back and forth. Okay. So I started out with this drum track. One of the rules was he couldn't use any loops, which is a real problem for me because I am not a drummer. But through a series of both, we'll call it community service psychological evaluations on the Discord, and me being patted on the back and being told, you can do it, it's okay, because I was totally panicking. I put this rhythm track together, and I'm just going to play some snippets out of it. I'm working entirely in the box here. This is just a kit full of samples that I threw together. And so we got this. So what is this? It's a kit in Ableton, 16 samples that I threw together. The processing on it is really just a little mid bump to make it sizzle a bit more. I've got this synthetic drum reverb on it for ambience. Let me turn this off to AV it. That's the drums by themselves, and I just added a little bit of room to it. You'll see utilities on the end of just about everything in Ableton. Once you're in Ableton with audio, because it's high bit rate, you don't really have to worry about headroom. So I don't. So as long as the master going out is clean, I'm good. So anyway, so I ended up building this rhythm part up, and broke it up into sections, verse, bridge, chorus, things like that, just to follow this sort of 8-bar rule. Every 8 bars, I was trying to change things up. And it was pretty rewarding. I liked it. I was happy with it. It's not the greatest, grooviest drum part. I'm very mechanical. It's very much on the grid. Not a lot of feel, but it works. So I fed that back to Haslo, and Haslo came up with this excellent chord pad. Let me pull this up here. So if you go look at his video, you could see him. I think this came out of I don't know if this came out of a JD08 or not, but here we go. I'm not going to play the whole thing, but basically he's got this progression that he repeats over and over again. And what he did with the chords was he basically played with the modulation and the timbre of the chord as he was repeating it. And so you get these really interesting sort of rippling and tremolo effects, and there's this shimmer high sort of ambient reverb in the background. I'll shut up for a minute. So when things come out of hardware, a lot of times especially if it's old hardware, or I have found that coming out of hardware, you can always bump the top end a bit. And so that's what I'm doing here. I'm adding a little high end on his channel. I compress it fairly aggressively because over the course of this track, it gets more and more distorted and hotter. So I just sort of leveled it off. And then I gave it, used the chorus a Roland sort of, what's this effect called? It's from, the Roland Dimension D, which is an Arturia sort of virtual version of Roland's old chorus rack mount, which I like a lot. And if you've watched any of my videos, I use it. But it puts a real nice spread on it. It's real subtle. Here it's in, now it's out. You could hear everything's pretty centered. When we bring it, it just spreads it a little bit, and I like that. And you could hear in the pad that he's doing, it's getting more and more distorted. It's getting like grittier and grittier as it's going along. So that's the processing for that. So he handed that back to me. And one of the interesting things was at the end, he does this really great sort of like fall. I don't know what he's processing that with, but it just turns his pad into this just brass kind of sound. It just sounds like French horns to me. So that'll come back later, because at the end, during post, we were putting in some additional horns. Anyway, so we get that pad from him. My role at that point is to put a bass line under it. And I am a layered, excessive kind of guy. So the bass line ended up being, how many is this? I think 8 tracks of Omnisphere. So it's, I will take synths, pull a preset, manipulate it a little bit, but then layer the shit out of it. And so we got this particular sound plays 2 notes at the beginning, and it plays 1 note at the end. Okay, so like real targeted. Then I wanted this sound, so on top of his pads here, let me bring them back in for a second. So on these pads, I really wanted this sort of Wendy Carlos Moog modular sort of sound. So I was just inspired by the sound of his chords reminded me of Clockwork Orange, the soundtrack to the film. And so I wanted these deep, sort of just old school analog bass wows coming in. But I can't leave anything consistent for the whole track, so then I started layering. So we bring in, right, that's this on top of it. Let's see. Let me isolate that. Here we go. Right, and this is another Omnisphere bass patch. I think I tweaked some of the LFO rate a little bit. Right, I'm not going to do everything in this. I'm not going to isolate everything, but basically we started pulling in ARP, and then we kept that low bass with a sort of mid bass on top of it and drenched the mid bass in this ambience. This is a Valhalla reverb, and just let it ring. and it plays really nice. It's real smooth, real silky, and I think it makes a nice contrast with his pads. Then we basically layer another ARP on top of it. This one's distorted. I think I'm playing with, what was this one? Oh, I was playing with the No Moger Foger virtual pedals. I think I put a little fuzz on top of that. And I think it still works with his pads. Anyway, so the bass builds and the bass builds and the bass builds. And so passed that back to Haslo, and he sent me back this awesome lead. So he sent back this lead. Let me temporarily do this. So he sent back this lead that was fairly mono, right? It started with these sort of glockenspiel sort of bell sounds, with sort of bell tree in the background. Really pretty. And he's bringing in that sort of horn behind it. And that turns into right? It's really great, just sort of a vocal, like, I like lead lines that sing, and this one sings. It's really great. But I wanted to spread it out a bit. So what I did was an old trick where you double the track. You totally clone the track. So it's 2 copies of that. One's panned hard left, one's panned hard right. And then you apply a tiny 3 millisecond, 2.5 millisecond delay on one of the channels. Feed it 100% wet, and it basically spreads it out to the point where you get a little bit more width out of it. It's sort of like double tracking, but fake. So you can hear now it's pushed left and right. Right. And then on the group bus for that, we're compressing it again. This lead has some really hot parts, so it's sort of aggressively compressed. I pulled most of the low end out, kept the mids and the highs, ran it through a Valhalla reverb. Right. By itself, it sounds like this. Right, and I think that sounds fine. It sounds good. I just wanted a little smoothing, a little bit more mid, and then some ambience behind it. It's just great. Those bell trees behind the lead is just awesome. So he delivers this lead. It's freaking awesome. All right. And one of the things that I wanted to do was at the end of the piece, let me pull it all back in. I did some manipulation of his pitch slightly. So which one was it? So here, he's doing this lead line, and it's repeating the same melody over and over again. So harmonically the same, and that's fine. It works. But at this sort of highlight of this crescendo at the end of the track, I wanted to make one harmonic change, and I wanted to shift the pitch of what he was doing up very slightly here, up a fifth. And so I just used a pitch shifter to do that. I duplicated, I literally chopped out the final notes of his piece. Was it the final notes? No, one of the mid pieces. And just shifted it up and layered it on top. So the integrity of his melody is still present, right? It's unchanged. But there's a harmony on top of it that's just built on top of by taking one of his own notes, shifting it up, and then putting that out there. And so you get this. We'll get to some of that in a second. And And this is the shift here. Right. So that's the only harmonic change throughout the piece. I wanted to keep growing up until this last fall here. Anyway. And these particular notes are absolutely drenched in reverb, right? It's just ringing out forever. So I don't know if that's entertaining or informative, but that's what's going on there. And then that was the bones of the piece. And really what we ended up doing was Haslo trusted me to go butcher it. And we had this sort of epic thing going on, so I really wanted to put in some big drums and horns. So we put in this French horn bit, and it's basically playing his melody line. It's just doubling it. So Haslo, his melody is doing an interesting thing with its timing, in that it's not necessarily predictable. It circumvents certain expectations, and I doubled that. So you'll hear some places where it sounds like maybe the melody stutters a bit. That's intentional, and I like it. And so I've tried to maintain that throughout the horn pieces. And then we also added, I keep saying we. Haslo had no choice. I dragged him through this last bit of production. I'm sorry, Haslo. But I wanted to, we put some risers in, some big hits. And so it sounds like. Right. And these are straight out of Contact. This is like one of the Contact libraries from Complete. Just big ass drums, taiko drums, timpani, things like that. Big booms. And so between that and the horns, right? Right. It's all his melody. So I think it worked out pretty well. So let me put this all back together very briefly and just play you the last segment of it. We're talking like this. Right, and we made one harmonic change here to just add that continuing to rise chord progression. But other than that, then we go back to what it was originally intended to be. I love those bends too. Anyway, this was super fun. I had a huge amount of entertainment out of doing this with Haslo, because I never knew what he was going to send me. And when I got it, it was like a puzzle. Like, okay, how do we fit this together? What was his intent? And we talk a bit, but really part of the fun was like surprising him, then saying, okay, I'm going to build on top of what you sent. I'm going to go in this direction and throw it out there and see what you do. Couldn't tell whether he was going to barf all over it or not and be like, this is terrible. But it worked out. So that's about it. So, hey, I hope this was entertaining, my rambling. And Haslo, thanks very much. And Midlife Synthesis, whose first name I still don't know. Thanks, man. And talk to you guys later. Thanks.